Penny Mordaunt has just not been tested enough in a major job. She could be quite exposed by heading to Downing Street at such a turbulent time.
Let's discuss the big story of the day, the only story in town, the next Prime Minister. Who will it be? I think the answer is increasingly clear, but there's still a few hours to go, and Penny Mordaunt might pull this out of the bag. It's time for PM's PM, your one-stop shop for everything that's happening in the latest Tory leadership race. We'll have a proper jingle for you at some point. Producer Lewis has been up all night with his kazoo, though we're up against it, seeing as the contest could be wrapped up very, very soon. But if Penny Mordaunt can pull 100 MPs together to endorse her, joining me all week in this slot will be Francis Elliott, the Times' former political editor. Morning, Francis.
Morning.
And Lucy Fisher in the studio, Times Radio's chief political commentator. How are you doing, Lucy?
Hi, Patrick.
Let's start, Lucy, with this ERG meeting that's about to kick off. This is Penny Mordaunt's last chance now. If she is going to get on the ballot, if she's going to make up that sort of 75 MP deficit between her and that 100 MP threshold, it's going to come from here. What are you hearing? What does it sound like it's going to happen?
Well, I think it's actually less important than we think. And Grant Shapps is not the only one who likes a spreadsheet. I too spent much of my Saturday poring over all the names on the various lists that the Times, Guido Fawkes, S Markets have drawn together. And in actual fact, a lot of the ERG, a lot of the hardline Brexiteer right-wingers have already declared. You're right that Mark Francois, the chairman of that group, David Jones, I think the deputy, and a few other key members haven't. But when you look at Steve Baker, Theresa Villiers, a lot of the right-wingers have already gone out, and a lot of them have gone out for Rishi Sunak. So I think that's interesting. I also think when you look at where Boris Johnson's supporters are starting to flee to, so far, only one has gone to Penny Mordaunt, that's Michael Fabricant, and already a dozen have switched to Sunak as his coronation looks increasingly likely. So for me, it feels all the momentum is with Sunak this morning. The ERG, obviously, it's in their interest to play up their significance and this idea that they could vote as a bloc and be kingmakers. But actually, I think there's only perhaps 20-odd ERGers who, or at least central to that group, who are left to declare.
And Francis, that would only take Penny Mordaunt up to 46, which is not it's clearly... It's short of what she needs. It's short of what she mustered last time. What's still in this for Penny Mordaunt at this point? Is this an exercise in proving to Rishi Sunak that she deserves a great office of state, perhaps? Because clearly it looks increasingly clear that she's not going to make it. So why is she still in this?
I think she thinks that it's her really last chance. There is no other shot at the leadership other than this. I think she has a decent argument, which is that we have a legitimacy and a mandate issue, and that, at the very least, the members, MPs, and the rest of us ought to have a situation where Rishi Sunak is at least asked some questions about his premiership, so that we kind of know what we might be getting. At the moment, you do look like the whole thing is, essentially is being installed by the bond markets and a gabardine rush of careerist Tory MPs.
Do you agree with that, Lucy?
Yeah, I do largely. I think the thing that's really done for Penny Mordaunt is the fact that this is a time that calls for a prime minister with the most economic experience. I actually think, she has a lot of interesting experience as the first female defence secretary. She's been out to war zones as a former international development secretary. She's been and seen humanitarian crises firsthand. I think her personal story is also compelling. She's the MP for Portsmouth North, where she actually grew up. Her mother died from breast cancer when she was 15. She became the primary carer for her younger brother. She's worked in factories and catering as a magician's assistant. There's a lot about her that's appealing, attractive, intriguing. But I just think this is not a time when the economy is front and centre. Sunak is pretty unbeatable. And I think particularly after what's gone wrong and imploded with Liz Truss, I think there is a sense that Penny Mordaunt has just not been tested enough in a major job. She could be quite exposed by heading to Downing Street at such a turbulent time.
And someone who is going to head to Downing Street at a turbulent time, obviously, is likely to be Rishi Sunak. Do you find it remarkable, Francis, that obviously the capacity of Tory MPs for duplicity, wasn't it Alan Clark who said they're the most sophisticated but duplicitous electorate in the world, to say one thing and then 5 minutes later say another about another candidate is, never ceases to amaze. But this has happened remarkably quickly, and a lot of the people who were backing Liz Truss are now falling in behind Rishi Sunak precisely because of his economic analysis that all of them 6 weeks ago said was needlessly gloomy and pessimistic and wasn't going to unleash a wave of growth. Have you been surprised at how quickly people have snapped back to that reality?
I've been surprised by the duplicity of Conservative, well, of MPs in general. Yes, actually, even I have been quite mildly shocked. I think the Nadeem Zahawi, Sir Robert Buckland, the real flip-floppers have probably done further damage to the image and standing of politics and politicians in general. Yeah, I mean, what about whether or not they accepted the kind of? But do they? I mean, I think it's a really open question whether they do truly accept the logical conclusion of the rejection of the Sunak analysis, and also where it stops, where this kind of new dose of economic realism actually kind of lands. Whether it does take us into some dangerous, forbidden territory around. The single market, for instance, and one wonders to start thinking whether the single market might become the kind of unspoken sort of twilight zone around which UK politics start to revolve as the
solution to the economic ills that the country
exactly. If you want relatively lower taxes and absolutely not awful public services, you are going to have a decent economy that's growing. Oh, what's the big thing that's stopping our economy growing? Well, we have a kind of a needlessly fractious relationship with our closest trading partner. What do we do about that?
Well,
that seems to be the only real question that will pertain over the next 2 to 5 years.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure Tory MPs are quite ready to.
No, I don't think they are either. So I mean, I just question the extent to which the premise of your question that they are actually in the mood for economic realism.
Well, exactly, and that's the question, Lucy. Just to wrap us up, the Halloween fiscal statement, Jeremy Hunt's big package of spending cuts and tax rises, whenever it comes, was always going to be difficult, particularly for Liz Truss because it was so at odds with what she promised. But still, for Rishi Sunak, it's going to be tricky because you're going to have an unpalatable offer to Tory MPs of cuts, spending cuts and tax rises. None of them will want to wear them. Will that be the ultimate test of the mandate Rishi Sunak wins, whether he can then say to them, look, you voted for me, you've made me leader in a coronation. Now we're going to have to suck up this quite bitter course of economic medicine to get the economy on the right track. Do you sense that Tory MPs, even if they are falling in behind Rishi Sunak, are ready to unite around that sort of prospectus for government? If they are, they're uniting around a candidate, but do you think they're prepared, they've girded their loins for that very tricky moment?
Well, I think it will be a question of degree. Clearly, he has styled himself as the candidate of fiscal responsibility, so MPs know that's coming. I think we have to see the level of restraint or cuts or tax raids that we're going to hear from Jeremy Hunt if, as looks likely, he's going to keep his position as Chancellor. But I do think, just casting back over the past couple of years, that Rishi Sunak has made a rod for his own back in that he reaped the benefits of the generous furlough package. He talked up the £400 billion public bailout that he rolled out as Chancellor when the coronavirus pandemic was raging. And it was all branded Rishi Sunak, his signature on everything, Rishi's dishes. He enjoyed a lot of popularity for that. But I felt at the time he never properly explained to people that this is, putting all that money on the credit card. It needs to be paid back. And I think now, he's looking likely he's going to be propelled into the top job. That is a problem for him. That one of the big reasons that we're going to need to have these tax rises and spending cuts that we think are coming is because public debt and the deficit has got so much worse because of the government's actions, which may have been necessary, but that argument to the public, to prime the public for future austerity or future restraint, was never made.
Well, plenty for Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt, whoever it may be, even if one is looking much likelier to get stuck into on day one, be that tomorrow or on Monday. Lucy Fisher, Times Radio's chief political commentator, and Francis Elliott, former political editor of The Times. Thanks very much for joining me this morning. Now,